The sun had barely begun to rise when a faint sound broke the stillness of the field. A slow, cautious crunch of footsteps against the gravel path. A local farmer named Elias was on his early morning route to inspect a broken fence. He hadn't planned to pass by the abandoned farmhouse, but something pulled him toward it that day. Maybe it was instinct, maybe fate. As he neared the structure, he heard something, soft, rhythmic whimpering. He stopped, listened, then took a few careful steps forward. The shed's broken door creaked in the breeze, revealing just a sliver of the shadows inside. That's when he saw her. A mother dog, barely breathing, sprawled across the dirt floor. Her body was thin and covered in scratches. Blood stained her fur. Yet even in that state, she had managed to cover 5 tiny pups with her body, shielding them from the cold. One of the pups stirred and let out a small cry. Elias froze, heart caught in his throat. "Oh God," he whispered. "What happened to you, girl?" He crouched down slowly, speaking in a calm, gentle tone. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." Her eyes fluttered open, cloudy with pain and fear. She didn't growl. She didn't move. She simply stared at him, as if trying to decide whether to trust this man. Then, with a deep, shaky breath, she rested her head back down. It was the first sign of surrender, a silent plea for help. Elias pulled out his phone and called the local rescue center. "We need a team out here now," he said. "There's a mother dog and her pups. She fought something bad last night. She's barely alive." Within 30 minutes, a rescue van arrived. A woman named Clara, the lead rescuer, stepped out. She'd seen her share of cruelty and survival, but nothing prepared her for what she saw inside that shed. Clara knelt beside the mother. "Oh, sweetheart," she murmured. "You did everything you could." The team moved quickly but gently. They wrapped the mother in a soft blanket, lifting her with care. She let out a faint whimper, but didn't resist. The pups were carefully placed in a padded box lined with warm cloth. On the ride back to the shelter, Clara held the mother dog in her lap, whispering to her the whole time. "You're safe now. You're not alone anymore." The vet team was already prepped when they arrived. The mother was given fluids and antibiotics. Her wounds were cleaned. She didn't need stitches, but the bites were deep and infected. The pups were examined one by one. Miraculously, all 5 were healthy. For the first few hours, Clara stayed by her side. She named her Grace. Grace was too weak to stand, but she watched everything. Her eyes followed every movement. When her pups were brought near her, she mustered enough strength to nuzzle them, letting out a low, comforting hum. In the days that followed, her body began to heal, but it was her spirit that needed the most mending. She flinched at sudden sounds. She cried in her sleep. Yet every day, she licked her pups, stood a little longer, and trusted Clara a little more. Clara kept a journal of Grace's recovery. On day 3, she wrote, "Today, Grace licked my hand. It was small, but it meant everything. For the first time, I think she believes we're on her side." Day by day, Grace regained her strength. The pups opened their eyes, revealing curious, glassy stares. They began to toddle around their pen, playfully nipping at each other. Grace would watch them with quiet pride, her body still frail but her eyes brightening. The rescue center shared Grace's story online, and it quickly went viral. Thousands of people were moved by her courage. Messages poured in from all over the world. People called her a hero, a survivor, a symbol of a mother's fierce love. But Clara knew Grace's journey wasn't over. Because healing a body is one thing. Healing a heart takes more. And just when things began to look better, something happened at the shelter that none of them expected. Something that would test Grace all over again. The moon hung low over the desolate field, casting a pale light over the abandoned farmhouse. Amidst the silence, the faint whimper of newborn pups echoed softly beneath a crumbling shed. Their mother, a frail and frightened stray, stood guard, her body trembling from exhaustion. But she didn't sleep. She couldn't. The growls were getting louder. Wild dogs were circling, eyes glowing in the dark. And she knew, if she closed her eyes, she might never open them again. What happened next will break your heart and show you the true meaning of a mother's courage. It all began in the forgotten outskirts of a small rural village, where people rarely ventured and stray animals outnumbered humans. An old, weather-worn farmhouse stood at the edge of a vast, empty field. Long abandoned, the structure had become a refuge for the lost, the wounded, and the unwanted. Among them was a thin, dusty-coated female dog. Locals had seen her wandering the area for weeks, belly swelling with pregnancy. She was skittish, darting away from every sound, hiding behind trees, running at the sight of humans. No one knew where she came from. She had no name, no collar, no home. But she had something else, life growing inside her. One rainy evening, she crept under the broken floorboards of the old shed beside the farmhouse. There, amidst the dirt and rotting wood, she gave birth to 5 tiny puppies. The storm raged outside, wind howling through the cracks in the walls. But she kept them warm, curling her body around them, licking each one clean with trembling care. Days passed. The skies cleared. The pups, eyes still shut, squirmed blindly beside her. She hadn't eaten properly in days. Her ribs pressed against her thinning fur, and her eyes were sunken with fatigue. But hunger didn't matter. Not now. Her entire world was those 5 tiny hearts beating beside her. Then came the night that would change everything. Around midnight, the first growl pierced the silence. It was low and menacing. Her ears perked up instantly. She lifted her head, alert. Another growl, closer this time. The hairs on her back bristled. She stood slowly, blocking the entrance to her makeshift den with her body. Through the wooden slats, she saw them, a small pack of wild dogs. They were scavengers, driven by hunger and desperation. They had caught the scent of her pups. She didn't run. Instead, she growled back, low and protective. Inside the shed, the pups whimpered. One tried to suckle. Another let out a tiny cry. She didn't flinch. Her body formed a shield over them, her eyes locked on the shadows outside. The wild dogs crept closer, their eyes glowing in the dark like tiny lanterns. One of them lunged forward, and she snapped. A sudden flash of teeth. A snarl that echoed through the field. She lunged, teeth bared, and bit the intruder on the snout. It yelped and stumbled back, startled by her fury. But it wasn't over. They circled. She barked, growled, lunged. Each time they advanced, she fought back. She was just one dog, starving, exhausted, half her normal weight, but she stood her ground. One of the wild dogs tried to sneak around the back. She noticed. She dashed across the shed, blocking the gap. Another lunge. Another clash of teeth. Blood stained the ground. Hers or theirs, she didn't know. But she never backed down. Hours passed. The pack kept testing her. Growling, barking, waiting. But she held strong. Each second felt like an eternity. Her muscles ached. Her paws bled. But she didn't stop. Somewhere near dawn, the wild dogs began to retreat. One by one, they turned and disappeared into the early morning mist. She collapsed beside her puppies, breathing heavily. Her body shook. Her eyes, half closed, scanned the darkness one last time before she drifted into a shallow, fragile sleep. But this was only the beginning, because help was finally on its way. But would it arrive in time? It started with a distant howl, low, eerie, and too familiar. The sound drifted in through the shelter's back window late one evening as Clara finished her rounds. At first, she thought she was imagining it, but then she heard it again, and Grace, who had been lying calmly with her pups, suddenly lifted her head. Her ears twitched. Her body tensed. Clara noticed instantly. "What is it, girl?" she whispered, stepping closer. Grace stood, slowly, shakily. Her tail was still. Her eyes were locked on the far wall, and a low growl rumbled from deep in her throat. Clara looked out the window into the shelter's fenced-back field. Nothing. But Grace remembered. That sound had etched itself into her bones. It was the same howl she had heard the night the wild dogs came. And somehow, one of them was close again. Security was immediately tightened. The staff installed additional motion lights and cameras, and volunteers took turns staying overnight. The wild dogs never breached the shelter, but Grace remained uneasy for days. She barely slept. She kept checking on her pups, and she would stand guard by the pen for hours, eyes locked on the door. Clara stayed with her as much as she could. She brought her warm meals, hand-fed her when Grace was too anxious to eat, and spoke softly to her during the long nights. "You don't have to fight anymore," Clara would say. "You're safe here. They won't hurt you or your babies again." Little by little, Grace began to believe it. Weeks passed. Her wounds healed. Her coat grew thicker. Her ribs no longer showed. And more importantly, she wagged her tail for the first time. One morning, Clara entered the shelter to find Grace playing with her puppies. Really playing. She chased them in slow circles, nudged them with her nose, and even barked a soft, happy bark. Clara laughed, tears rising in her eyes. "There you are," she whispered. I knew you were still in there." Soon after, the shelter began looking for forever homes. Not just for the puppies, but for Grace too. It wasn't easy. Many people wanted the cute, playful pups. Fewer asked about the mother. But then came the email. A family from out of state had followed Grace's story from the beginning. They had lost their own senior dog a year ago and had waited until it felt right to open their home again. They didn't want a puppy. They wanted Grace. The day they arrived, Grace met them in the shelter's garden. Clara had prepped her, but Grace was nervous. She lingered behind Clara, peeking out from behind her leg. The mother of the family knelt down and extended her hand. "Hi, sweet girl," she said softly. "We've been waiting for you." Grace hesitated. Then slowly she walked forward. She sniffed the woman's hand, then pressed her nose into her palm. That was it. Clara watched, barely holding back tears, as Grace leaned into the woman's arms. It wasn't just a meeting. It was a recognition, a quiet knowing. 2 days later, Grace went home. The shelter staff lined up to say goodbye. Clara knelt beside her one last time. "You saved your babies, Grace. And now it's time for someone to take care of you." Grace licked her cheek. Today, Grace sleeps on a soft bed by the fireplace, surrounded by toys and love. Her pups were adopted into good homes nearby, and the families stay in touch. They even meet at the park sometimes, Grace watching proudly from the shade while her children romp and tumble in the grass. No one knows exactly where she came from, but everyone knows what she became. A fighter, a protector, a mother, and now finally home.